So, hello, Judge.
Hey,
so glad
Doctor.
to share space with you today.
It's good to be
I'm
here.
looking forward to discussing how to create a village to reduce violence in Columbus. Right? So, let me ask you, as we work to develop new social norms and beliefs that encourages positive behaviors and healthy lifestyles, what does recreating a village look like today? Who is involved and what do they need to do?
Well, Dr. Lunceford, in order to talk about how we recreate the village, we need to have some historical context to it. Since slavery, there have been systematic laws and
Yes.
ordinances and rules put in place to impact the Black family negatively, starting with slavery, where fathers were taken out of homes. Many times women had children ripped from them. Women were impregnated by their slave owners, and families were disconnected and disenfranchised. Then after the Emancipation Proclamation, other laws were instilled to further enfranchise the family. Jim Crow laws, Reconstruction period, they had laws, vagrancy laws, that made it illegal for you to be unemployed, so it criminalized unemployment. Mindful people had just gotten out of slavery. They also had apprenticeship programs where they made low-income youth work programs to make them a better person. And then we move forward, and during the Depression, single mothers were not allowed benefits or pension benefits to take care of their children.
Okay.
So 1935, the New Deal passed, and that's when they gave aid to dependent children and Title IV funding. We all hear about that now, but that was enacted in 1935 by Congress. But the caveat was they gave states the right to legislate who was eligible for aid to dependent children. So the states were able to determine who was suitable, who was worthy, the duration of it, and who could be exempt from it. So with that being said, that's where they started naming mothers and calling them unfit and unsuitable to raise their children, and finding homes to be unsuitable. So it was a carrot that if you needed money and we gave it to you, we had to consider you worthy to get that money. So we have the Fleming Rule in 1961 that was passed, and they gave incentives for children of dependent children. They could receive funding, and if they lived in an unsuitable home, if they were placed in foster care. So from there, you see a surge of children being in the foster care, and with the funding and the state's legislation, we saw an uptick of children in foster care, non-whites. So by 1999, over 500,000 children, non-white children, were in foster care.
Wow.
So now we have tens of thousands of parents who've been disconnected from their children, and tens of thousands of children who have lost their parents, their kin, their neighborhood, and their community. So when you ask me
Absolutely.
that, in order to recreate a village, we need all players on deck. We need a collaborative effort from everyone in their sphere of influence to help establish our Black family neighborhoods. We need support systems for parents to get them through their hard times, whether it's alcohol addiction, whether it's criminal behavior, whether it's poverty.
Yeah.
We need volunteers to work with children, to advocate for them at the school system, at the school level, in the criminal justice system. We need leaders to challenge these laws that disenfranchise Black children from their
Yes,
families
yes.
and place children in foster care. And we all know once children come in foster care, it's almost impossible to get out of that quagmire. We need the legal community to advocate for parents when they're in the court system to avoid their children going into placement. But if they go into placement, place them with relatives. And we need relatives to be able to step up and keep children in their neighborhoods and in their communities if parents have to be removed out the home. And then we also need sponsors to sponsor nonprofit programs and to develop parenting programs, credible messengers. Those are people, ex-felons or ex-addicts, who can help parent people and coach them through their dark times. Yeah. And we just need organizations, community leaders, cousins, fake cousins, but everyone to help keep that family stable and keep them in their community and keep that community on a trajectory to having transgenerational blessings and having multi-generational wealth. Yes. And having education unlimited.
Yes, I love that. right? Government, parents, youth, philanthropic partners, educational institutions, religious institutions, medical facilities, right? Everyone working together because we can no longer afford to work in our silos.
Right.
We have to work together because hashtag we're safer together.
Right. And there is no such thing as a silo because you can't contain crime just like you can't contain sin. So you can move out into the suburbs, you can move out into the rural areas, but it will capture you somewhere. And all of us pay for it at some point in time, whether increase in taxes, inflation, increase in medical costs, because we all have to pay for it.
Absolutely.
And I think the government has to acknowledge the wrongs that they have done and perpetuated over the Black families and provide stipends and financial support for families so they can keep their children at home and with their relatives. Big thing is I think legislators need to change the laws where relatives get comparable pay like foster parents do to help them to be able to take care of their children. A lot of parents and grandparents want to raise their relatives, but they don't have the means. And you're giving it to a stranger to raise your child. I think they need to relax the laws that say if you're a felon, you can't be a caretaker. If you have had an addiction, you can't be a caregiver, and work together. And us who have the areas of influence to force families to stay together and force entities to cause them to be together and be more successful.
Yep. I agree.
Yep. So on that thread, why do you, Dr. Lunceford, think it is important to understand the systematic history related to violence in Columbus?
I mean, I think that's an amazing question. Great question, right? Because we have to understand that there's a direct correlation to past harms to today's current state, right? And so we've already been, as you've already highlighted, right, of some of the past injustices, when you're thinking about events such as slavery, Jim Crow, redlining, and all these other heinous injustices that have happened, we have to realize that they have created systems. And these systems then determine who has and who has not, right? And so when you're talking about those systems, we're talking about resource access, and we're talking about them influencing communities. And so we have the events, then we have systems created, we have communities influenced, and then that produces non-productive produces non-productive value systems and social norms that then encourage problematic thinking that then drives destructive behavior. So then you have that link that goes through that some people are willing to acknowledge and that we need to do more into acknowledging, because this goes into like the social determinants of health, whether it's the social determinants of health or structural determinants of health. All those things that we have to take in consideration: poverty, housing, education, health, employment. You know, we have to talk about things like genealogy, teaching people, where do we come from? Why is it important to know that history so that we can get that sense of pride? When you know who you are, you feel more comfortable in walking in your skin and knowing where you belong in this world and what your purpose is. And so doing all of that and having some trauma healing and things like that, that's why it's important to understand that, because if you don't understand that and you take it out of schools and you take it out of books and you want to shake your head like we can't talk about those kind of things, you can never, ever deal with the issue. We'll never deal with the disease. We'll only be dealing with the symptoms. And then we know when we're dealing with those symptoms, the problems will just keep going and going and going. And then we're wondering, why do we still see violence?
Yeah, I mean, we've been out of slavery shorter period of time than we were enslaved. And we are the only group of people who don't have that connection to our mother country and don't have the wherewithal to find our genealogy and our DNA and see how we are and where we are.
Knowing where you come from, right? Because not all Black people come from Africa or from Kenya or wherever, right? So knowing where you come from, knowing your descendants, and knowing that your ancestors, knowing you really are a descendant of kings and queens. And that greatness that resides in you, it comes with that whole understanding.
Yep, and that's another reason, another way you can recreate your village is everyone get impactful and everyone get involved. And once you have a sense of self-worth and you love yourself, then you begin to respect yourself and love other people. If you don't love yourself, you're not going to love and respect anyone else. And it's that self-love that people are taught from infancy on. And when you disengage and disenfranchise a group of people, then it's going to be harder to get that village. But we can do it if we all work collaboratively, get together, like you said, and not work in silos and believe if you just stay huddled in your house in Gahanna, you're safe. If I send my kid to a private school, I'm safe. because we're all interconnected, and we're only as healthy as the weakest link.
But then you found out you went to Gahanna and sent your child to private school, and violence didn't go anywhere, right? It
Right.
followed you there.
Yep.
You found out it wasn't just in Columbus and Columbus City schools. It's something that's everywhere, and how we work together. And I love that. So with that in mind, for my many years as a probation officer, right? I was a juvenile probation officer 6 years.
That's how we met.
Yes.
With the court system. Yes.
Yes, through the court system. It's been a long time.
Yes.
Well, it's only been about 5 years, because I'm like 25. What are you, 30?
And I'm 22.
Yeah, okay. And then I did about 12 years as an adult PO, including those living with mental health and felony records. And one of the things that I did notice is that we can talk about all this, but the criminal justice systems can be very confusing, complex, and overwhelming.
Yes.
Right? For many people at times. What do we need to know about navigating the legal system to address violence?
Well, and that is a great question. And as a judge in the juvenile branch and the domestic court, I deal with families in crisis. We deal with abuse, neglect, dependent children, divorces, dissolution, custody, abortion bypasses, unruly children and delinquent children, and abused, neglect, and dependent children. And a lot of times when people come into our court system, they're already intimidated. They don't have the wherewithal and they don't have the knowledge base to understand what is going on. And since we're talking about this from a violence perspective, I'll talk about victims. If you come into the court system, I want you first to understand that justice grinds slowly. I see a lot of people get frustrated because they think if something happens to them, or they're a victim of crime, or their family is, that there's instantaneous justice. The justice system, just because of by volume alone, cases take a long time to move through that.
Yes.
So if people can just understand that it is a lengthy process, and that's what me and my bailiff try to explain to people, so you don't get frustrated, you don't give up, you don't stop coming to court because you're just tired of coming to court. And you have to understand there's a lot of components to work into it. If a crime is committed, the police department are tasked with the job of trying to find out who, what, when, where, and how. And they're trying to gather evidence, talk to witnesses, talk to the victims, and try to collect evidence to substantiate or get probable cause to charge them with a crime. And as a community, we have to stop this non-snitching mentality. Snitches get stitches, because a lot of times crimes don't, and then they end up in ditches. Because a lot of times crimes don't get solved because people don't open their mouths and don't tell. We've had people victims of murders and they won't tell, and they were there with the murderer. So we've got to learn how to reach out and help each other and offer the police the information they need so we have a safe neighborhood to live in, because all of us want to be safe. So collaborate with the police, and you're not a snitch because you tell somebody what someone did. And so the police have their job of investigating and filing charges. Well, then the prosecutor is tasked with the job of having a bill of indictment through jury or through our court filing a complaint for children, because children are treated different than adults. And once the prosecutor files charges, then whoever is the suspect has a right, due process rights, to have an attorney. Most of our people are indigent, so you have a public defender or a court advocate. So you have an exchange period where discovery is exchanged, where there's ongoing investigation with the police department, where plea deals are being made, and that may be a daunting process, but the victims, I want them to always remember, don't give up, show up to court, keep in contact with the prosecutor to see where the process is going, have an advocate. There's victim advocates that help and represent you in court, and then there's also services like victim of violence. There's money available, or you can ask for restitution or find support groups to help you be financially whole, or get counseling if you're traumatized by it. So the first thing is, I want people to know that it's a lengthy process and nothing happens overnight.
Yes.
2, you are who you represent. When you come to court, be presentable. There's a way to dress wherever you go. And I know we live in a very relaxed and informal environment, but when you walk to court, you cannot come in with bonnets and house slippers and
I can't come in my Daisy Dukes? What? So even as a black judge, I can't come in front of you in my bonnet and my slippers talking about, hey, girl?
No, I'm probably more strict because I'm like, we can't do that. And then I'll turn into auntie mode and be like, honey, bonnets are for sleeping in.
Oh, okay.
Period. All right, doctor, what role do individuals and organizations and businesses play in supporting healing efforts and preventing violence?
Great question, because it's really important to realize that we all play a role in preventing violence, right? Violence affects us no matter what, whether it's directly or indirectly. And oftentimes the crime and violence that we're seeing in the communities, when we talked about that lineage from historical harm to society, to systems, to communities, to value systems, to thinking, to behaviors, oftentimes we realize that those behaviors are the manifestation of the pain and trauma that has come up through all of that journey, right? So we all play a role because it impacts us. And I think, well, let's start with government, right? Everybody has the role. Government. Can we get some responsible gun legislation?
Before that, that's why it's so important
To
and
vote.
critical to vote. Do the census and vote. And you have to vote all the way down the line. The last time you want to learn about a judge is when you come before me. You need to know your judges before you have to go to court. Judge Beatty Blunt said it best. By the time you get to a judge, it's too late to find out about him. You got what you bargained for. So it is so important and critical to vote.
Yes. What I hear a loud resounding is that we have to work together.
Yes.
We can't do this alone. Government, philanthropy,
Religious
business,
organizations.
religious organizations, or anything like that. So we all have individual responsibility because crime, violence impacts all of us, and prevention starts with all of us.
Yes.
And so I love to hear that, and I want to thank you for sharing your space today.
Thank you for having me.
Giving us your wisdom and all that, and because I know we go way back and all the experiences that we have and all that kind of stuff bringing in this moment. So
Yep.
thank you.
And this is a lifelong mission and passion. So find your passion and develop it and then help somebody else. You have to pull somebody else up.
I say all the time, find that which breaks your hearts and do your part to solve it. Yep.
Yes.
There we go.
Well, thank you.